Alrighty, here we are. Welcome to Spirits and Cousins. I'm Tish.
And I'm Courtney.
And this is episode 2. And today, we're going to talk about definitions. But we'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's talk about another kind of spirit, the one we're drinking. Courtney, what are we drinking today?
Today we are drinking Michter's.
And it's not just any Michter's.
Of course not.
It's Michter's American whiskey. So a little different than a bourbon, but not too far apart. It's smooth, it's nice. I can taste the nuttiness in it. How about you?
Yeah, I like the smoothness of it, and it just flows down my throat nicely. That was really weird to say.
Well, there's a lot of things we're going to be talking about that are weird to say. So
I mean, that's true.
So that won't be the first thing.
No.
So let's get going with today. It's episode 2. If you all remember, in episode 1, we talked about why we're doing this, our history, backgrounds, and just to be clear, I think of myself as more of the techno geek, whereas Courtney is the actual expert in all of this.
I don't know that I'm an expert, but I have had a lot of experience.
Well, and that usually is what an expert is.
I mean, yeah, but every experience too, I'm still learning. They're just things that can come through that are unexpected and just different. And sometimes it's a little hard to wrap your head around it because it's so odd.
And that's why we talk about it. So exactly. We discuss, we share experiences, and as a result, we are enlightened. So
I like that.
Yeah, I thought you would. I just did that off the cuff.
That was a good off the cuff.
So today, this is going to be mostly Courtney. I'll just break it up a bit by introducing the different types of things we're going to be talking about. But as I mentioned earlier, today is about definitions. And when you think about energy and paranormal, I'll just say energy maybe. There are all different kinds. There are ghosts and spirits, which everyone knows about and everyone watches on TV. And then there's elementals, and there's beings, and there's demons, and there's entities, vortex, portals. So there's a lot to go over, but I know many of you are always wondering what's the differences between a ghost and a spirit. What is an elemental? And what actually is a demon? And is a demon a spirit or a ghost? I don't know. But guess what? Courtney's going to explain these all to us today. So Courtney, you want to kick us off with what's first on the list?
So first on the list, we're talking about ghosts. And ghosts are residual energy from a formerly living, breathing being. So, and when I say the word being, that refers to energy. So like we might say we're human beings, think of a being in that way, but not human. It could be anything. The residual energy from a ghost often happens in a pattern. So it might be something that they did often when they were alive, like walking up and down stairs, knocking on doors. So it often happens in a pattern, but it is a non-thinking residual energy. So it is not something that can interact with you. And it often is there at specific times of day. It can't do anything more or different from that pattern.
Is that where like people talk about when they stay in these hotels and they see the lady in the white dress going down the hallway at night?
It is a possibility, yeah. Yes.
Then what's the difference between a ghost and a spirit?
A spirit. So also just keep in mind, these are things that I've channeled and have discovered work for me, and other people might have some slightly different definitions of these things. So for me, a spirit is a being that has been on earth, but is not currently in a physical body, such as animals and people. So those spirits, it isn't residual energy. It is they actually have the energy and the power to engage with people on earth.
Is there like an example you can think of? I mean, I watched some dog movie once where the dog was really the father that had come back and the dog keeps watching out for the kid. Is that like a spirit?
Well, so even think of the experience that you had last night.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about that in this episode.
I know, but that's a little dinger that people can think about when they want to maybe come back and listen to us. So as a spirit is a being that has been on earth. So it might be like my grandparents or your aunt and uncle,
right?
Those spirits that we can talk with and engage with, who can give us answers. That isn't just a pattern that they're exhibiting over and over again.
So ghosts can it's that thing you see wandering around. Do you see ghosts? You
can, but it's more of...
But they don't interact with you.
No. Mm-mm.
Do they know you're there?
No. Just think of it as just
Are they kind of lost?
No, just think of it as they're not actually there. It's more of a hologram.
Okay. But do we interact with ghosts, or they seem more passive than a spirit?
They are more passive.
Okay.
So even though like when we went to Alcatraz and we felt that the solitary confinement room, and we both were like, whoa, that's heavy energy. That was residual energy. There was not a spirit in there in that moment.
Okay.
That's residual energy from the anger and maybe even the depression and the elevated emotions that they were feeling when they were in that room. So that is more of a residual energy.
Oh.
But then we were talking to a different spirit who was engaging with us. Was that Charlie?
Something like that.
And that is a spirit.
Okay.
So he was talking with us, engaging. He could answer our specific questions where a ghost cannot.
Okay. So that's ghost, spirit.
Yeah.
Next is elemental. This sounds so like intellectual, but tell us about an elemental.
An elemental is an interdimensional being or energy form. And there are typically 4 elements that we can work with. There could be more, also keeping that in mind. So they facilitate relationships between Earth and humans. They also work often with Mother Earth. So people often have a hard time believing in these things because you can't see them. At least with ghosts and spirits, you can often feel that energy and sometimes see them. The elementals can be a little more challenging because some people just like, oh, that's so far out there. But I've had experience with them. We've had experience with them together. And so the various elementals, there's earth, which is like gnomes and trolls. There's tree and plant energy. Then we have air, and that's typically fairies. And this list is not exhaustive in terms of the examples. Then we have the water elementals, and that can be water sprites, things like King Poseidon. And then we have fire, which can be dragons.
Do you actually see dragons?
I have seen fairies with my own eyes. Mm-hmm. I've also seen things like trolls and gnomes. Mm-hmm. Where I lived in Minnesota, we had gnomes all over there, and they were really fun to engage with. They also were tricky because they would like to play with cars.
Really? And when would you see like dragons? Would you see dragons in the same way you see like a troll? Like I remember you talking about seeing a troll out by your family's lake cottage by the water. Do you see a dragon in the same way you see a troll?
I have not seen a dragon. That doesn't, and that's where it's a little odd because it's like, well, if you don't see them, are they really there? And I think it's still possible that they're there.
And here I thought gnomes were just those little guys that people put on their lawns.
Right? You'd think that.
I think, yeah.
We had a really cool experience with an earth being.
Oh, yeah. Recently we were in Oregon and doing some work. And actually we started inside and moved to outside. Mm-hmm. And you had a really interesting conversation. Maybe on one of these we'll actually play it because we recorded it.
Yeah.
But maybe you could share, like, that's a good example of where there was, would I say there was an energy coming through and it identified itself as was it a troll?
No, it wasn't a troll. I couldn't quite figure out what exactly it was, but it kept telling me it was an earth energy, an earth elemental, and it was a protector of the land. And so it was there temporarily and had not been there for forever. It came to work with the land and protect it. And then it's not intending to stay forever.
How does a water sprite show itself? How do you identify that? Like you said, King Poseidon or water sprite. What is that? Don't scare me so I don't ever want to go swimming in a lake again.
You don't need to worry about that. How I've seen King Poseidon before is just through pictures. You'll take and you're like, and it created just an odd picture. Mm-hmm. I was like, what the heck is that? And it was actually a friend who took it. She's like, oh, I interacted with King Poseidon today and we talked all about it. And it just was really neat. And I could see it in her photo. Not like a huge face where you'd like, crazy. Oh, that's it. But you had to look in it and see.
I could see
you could see the outline.
As you go through these, I could see us doing episodes with stories for each of these as well. Mm-hmm. That would be interesting for our listeners to hear about.
My biggest experiences have been with earth and air elementals. I have left fewer with fire and water. And I've encountered other elementals, but I just couldn't figure out what to call them.
Didn't you get a picture? Was it of a troll or a fairy?
I have a picture of an air elemental that it's not a fairy, but it looks like it could be a fairy. It is. That was one of my favorite photos ever. And I have some photos with angels too.
And what about, where does orbs fit into this?
So orbs in this area can be iffy because orbs can also come out when it's dusty or when there's moisture in the air. They can also appear like orbs. So orbs are a little controversial because of that. But when I take photos, I set my intention of what I want to show up. So I will often say things like, all right, I'm going to take some photos. Anything that is dust or moisture or anything that is not of this, that is of this area can go away and only show me the things that are not of this earth.
Got it.
Or not of this dimension. And so that's when then I take pictures. And how I can also distinguish some of them is they often have colors in them. Not always, but often.
Okay. And you're probably at some point going to talk about the different colors mean different things?
Yeah, and different shapes. So in some of my photos, I have some small triangles. And to me, those are more like aliens.
Right. Things
from other galaxies and planets. But then I also have these cute little orbs that are really bright circles but are small.
White. Well, you had told me once that if they are different colors, it means different things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like white is a good energy. Can they get black? Do they get black?
I don't know, but I would not necessarily classify them as being good or bad energy, just of different. So it's more of I'll see the fairies and we'll see some spirits and orbs. And then I have you can see some faces in some of the orbs the shots I've taken. But yeah, the triangles tend to be more alien-like. And then if there's anything green, then that tends to be more heart-centered. So things that just want to show you their love and support.
Great. So we're going to move on to the next group. First is being, and you're going to talk about the word demon and then entities. And then I get thoroughly confused understanding the difference between some of these. So this is a really good episode to discuss the differences between, first we'll talk about a being, a demon, and an entity.
So a being is the word I use to describe an energy form. So I might say I encountered a being today. I often will use it interchangeably with spirit, but it's not always a spirit. So I might say I talked with an elemental being today. So when I say being, it's typically a more generic word that maybe I didn't figure out or discover what type of elemental it was. So I'll use the generic word of being.
Now, I obviously don't have the experience you do. I tend to use just the word energy when I don't know what something is, or if I'm feeling something and I can't tell what it is, but I know something's there, I say energy. Is that okay to use that too?
I think so.
Okay.
You know, I think too, people just need, if we all use our own language, just have to talk about it and say your definition.
Right.
So I think that's fine. I use energy often more as a sensing experience, but I don't think you're using it wrong at all. I use the word energy more meaning of like when someone walks in the room and they might have just an elevated emotion like anger. It's like, whoa, there's a lot of anger energy coming off of them. Or you can use it to describe things that you can't see. Energy is everything. Everything has energy, which is a frequency. So plants, trees, flowers, animals, anything that is a breathing, living being has energy.
Got it. So that's a being. This is used to describe an energy form. So I guess it makes sense. The next one is what everyone thinks about when they think honestly about paranormal, because everyone assumes that anything that's not living, any energy, spirit, ghosts that's not living is demonic or is scary, because it's not something we run into all the time. But demons, both as a category and just even as a word, when you say that to most people, first thing that comes to mind are the scary movies and demonic possession and exorcisms. And I know that you don't particularly use this word too much, but I know that everyone wants to hear about how you define it, how you think about it.
Well, I think about this word demon very differently than most people.
Like me.
So I feel like this word is a little controversial, and I might make it a little more controversial. I don't know. I don't use this word very much. And the reason is because I feel like demon has such a negative connotation to it. It's such a horrible thing. And quite frankly, it usually is a bad thing or not a good thing. But it's usually not as major as people make it out to be.
Yeah, makes sense.
And this is the part where I think I get a little controversial. I think that demons can be created from us, or it's brought forward by something we did. I don't feel like demons just come and say, "Ooh, let me attach to you. You're great." I think it's people playing with things and saying things without having intention, or being lonely and calling in things to keep them company. And they don't know what it is. And they allow it to hang around. And so I think it's people. So that's what I believe a demon is. I think we can call it into existence, or we bring it through, like through a portal. We create an opening where they can come through.
I was reading something earlier this week and kind of preparing for this and going through the different words and definitions you're going to go through today. And I read something about, I can't remember his name. I bet you we could get him on the podcast. He has done probably more exorcisms than anyone in the Catholic Church in the United States. And he's very prolific and likes to talk about it. But I read that he said that 2/3 of the people that come to him looking for help and they think they need an exorcism, the Catholic Church today will not do an exorcism until you go through a psychiatric analysis. Because his belief, and this is part of the Catholic Church's belief, and by the way, the Catholic Church, the reason that the Catholic Church does exorcisms and you don't hear about Methodist ministers doing them is because of the role that a priest plays, and the pact they make with God when they become a priest is different than any other religion. And they become some sort of like approved communicator with entities and things. It's a weird thing. I'll have to pull it up. I'll share it with you. But wow. This priest was saying that 2/3 of the time, what is believed to be demonic is the person either creating that out of a gap they might have in their mind mentally, or something that's traumatic that's happened, and so they create these visions, etc. They said the biggest way they determine whether something is a demon or demonic or not, or whether it's possessing someone, is only a demon would know things about someone's personal history without ever meeting them. Mm-hmm. Even they say, speaking in different tongues, if it is actually a language, would be unusual. But it was really interesting. I'm going to share that podcast with you, and the article. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, demons are. I just think it's a lot of our own making, and of us just not being careful enough. And then when we become fearful of whatever we did bring in or create, then we become fearful, and whatever it is then clings on to you more, which then creates more issues.
That's kind of what this priest was saying.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh my gosh, something is really wrong. It's like, well, yeah, something is wrong, but you're also playing with things that you shouldn't be playing with without having better knowledge of it or more knowledge of what you're doing.
And what this priest was saying was, a lot of times when this sort of situation happens and a demon comes into play, many times that person has denounced their belief in God, and that is some sort of major sin to do, and it's an invitation to that. I don't know if it's an entity or a demon or a spirit or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's an open door for them to come in and begin engaging.
Yes, and to continue. And so that is opening up that portal, a gateway that connects these worlds. So if you're calling in something, then it can easily go through because you've given it permission by not setting intentions and by doing things that maybe you don't know what you're doing.
Not to get too far off track, it's all part of this. I think it would be good for you to explain, because a lot of the folks that are listening to this might be listening because they're curious, they're interested, maybe they want to do some of their own exploration. And I've always heard you say, and you've shared with me several times, it's one of the things I've learned from you, the requirement to set intentions.
Yes.
Because we were just talking about how people ask for some of this when we were just talking about demons. And that's why it's so important to set those intentions. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could talk just for a minute about setting intentions, since you're talking about, honestly, and I know this is the part that seems very engaging. It's one of the things that usually gets people interested in even understanding everything else. But the connection between things like demons and portals, because other things come through portals too.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's why intentions are so important. So it'd be really, I think, good for everyone listening for you to talk for a minute about setting intentions and the sheer importance of it with whatever you're going to experiment, try, pursue.
Well, and the other thing too is I set intentions in my everyday life of how I want my day to be or how I want to be in my day. And so intention setting is a big part of my life, which can also contribute to manifesting. So why I set intentions is because it gives me a goal to work on. I'm able to then manifest how I want to be. But then the other thing with intentions in regards to this is, who or what do I want to come in? And I want to be very intentional about it, because I don't want to bring in things that I don't want around me. I want to surround myself with love. I want to surround myself with joy. And then I also want to help things heal and work through and get to heaven or whatever that space is. And so I set intentions because I don't want to call anything forward that I don't want to deal with or don't know how to deal with. And I don't want it to come in and wreak havoc in my life or anyone else's life. And therefore, I set intentions of what I want to come through. So often, like when you and I sit down and do paranormal things, we set the intention of, hey, only beings and people, spirits who love us, who have loved us, who are no longer present, come on in and talk to us. We are open to you to talking with us if you are.
And if you're not, stay the hell out.
Yep. And that's why, too, when we're done, you close that intention. You thank them because we're very grateful they're willing to have conversations with us and be around us. And then we close that door because we don't want anything else coming through that shouldn't be.
It makes a lot of sense. And it is funny how interchangeably some of these are used. But if you're really going to be a student of this, there are very distinct differences between all of these words and meanings.
Well, and when people, for example, why Ouija boards have the reputation they have is people will buy them and they're excited because maybe they can interact with something and maybe they can see what else is out there, but then they don't set intention. So again, it's a portal. Anything can come through it. And so Ouija boards aren't bad. They're only bad if you don't set intentions for what you want to come through.
Can I ask you another question about portals?
Yeah.
Now, granted, this might be because I've watched a few too many scary movies growing up, but I'm going to ask anyway. When you talk about a portal, which is a gateway that connects the physical world to the spirit world, you hear about stories, and then I also admittedly have seen it in movies where there's a part of a home or, a building or a barn or something, and they find the portal like in a wall or through a door. How do they get created? Like, do they just choose some place to come through, or does it have some meaning? Did it start off as something else, or is it usually a location where something happened or took place? I've always wondered, how do you create a portal? A lot of times portals are mirrors, in some of these investigations that I've read about or seen. And I'm just curious, like, how do portals get created, and do they have definitions and boundaries?
That's a great question, and one I can't fully answer. To me, a portal can be made by a human being that's on the planet. And again, it just depends on intention and what they're trying to do with it. Because
if you had an altar in your basement and you were, that could end up being, because a lot of times, okay, granted, I see it in movies, but a lot of times it's like a mirror.
It could be.
Or it's like a room in the basement, but usually what they have associated with it is something happened there.
Often, yes. So one of the areas of portal, when I would go on ghost tours in Minneapolis, in this one building, there was one area in particular, and that one spot felt a little bit colder. And it was just, I think, like a big circle. Mm-hmm. It felt slightly colder, but I could feel the energy of it had a different vibration to it. And so that's how I could feel it. To be honest, I think anything or anyone could possibly make a portal. Okay. Again, it's about intention, and it's also about who was in that building before, who could have created that. Or was it an entity or a different spirit that created that so they can move through the world in a different way?
Do you want to talk about vortexes?
Yeah, let's talk about, let's talk about entities real quick.
Okay.
So entities, I use that word often where people might use the word demon instead. I use the word entity as a being who has not been in a physical form, but has the ability to communicate and engage. So some people might consider an entity a demon, but it isn't always. And often isn't.
Yeah, I find myself, of course, I'm still new to this, but I find myself using some of these words interchangeably without knowing. Well, no, I do admit, okay, I don't call everything a demon, that's for sure. But I do interchange like entities, spirits, and energies. Okay.
I think that's okay though, because this is all so different, and a lot of these things are things we can't actually see. So that's why also I think some of these definitions have a little bit of leeway to them.
The other thing is we're so influenced by what we see, what we watch.
Mm-hmm. All those TV shows about the paranormal.
Well, it's interesting because that might be kind of a good segue into talking, now that we've talked about all these definitions, it's kind of maybe a good segue to talk about how they're portrayed, how they're portrayed, not just in the media, but yeah, I guess in the media. And then, I know that most everyone listening to this has watched Kindred Spirits and Ghost Adventures and
PRS, Paranormal State.
Yeah. No, I mean.
Yeah.
And
it's true. Ghost Adventures.
I think you've always said this, but I'll say that you all should keep in mind that and those shows are done and produced to not only be dramatic, but to be engaging so you keep watching. Mm-hmm. It's not always, I learned this from Courtney, it is not always what the reality is. The times that I've had the opportunity to go out with Courtney to different sites and locations, they must condense down hours and hours and hours of taping down to the 30 minutes or even what they end up with in an hour. Because sometimes you can go a long time, and maybe if you're trying to get a reading from a location, multiple days trying to get something. So I wonder, just how produced what we see right now is.
I wonder too. I don't know. I feel like the show that I like the most, and that, that's similar to what we do or what we like to do, is Kindred Spirits. Mm-hmm. I like how they go in, they talk to the people, they find out the history, and then they go in and they talk. And they're not trying to scare something into happening. They're not creating fear. They're not demanding spirits do things. They just want to sit and talk and get to know and figure out what's happening, so they can then inform the people of the house or wherever they are. And then it can be figured out what to do next. Where I think a lot of shows do more of that fear-based of like demanding and let's create all this drama and what's that thing over there? I feel like they might make it bigger than it actually is, but I'm not there. So, I enjoy watching the shows to see what happens, to see what else is out there. And then I've learned from watching those two, how do I want to be? How do I want to do this?
I was watching one recently that will go unnamed. You'll have to guess who it was or which group it was. But they were at the LA Murder House in Los Feliz. And the LA Murder House in Los Feliz is notorious because years and years ago, I think sometime in the 50s, a doctor and his family lived there. And the doctor at some point went mad and killed his family and himself in the house. And there's always been this thing about what drove him to do it. Was he possessed, by some demonic entity? And funny thing is after he murdered his family and himself, the house went, for the most part, it went unsold and unlived in for decades. And then someone bought it. It's a prime piece of real estate. They bought it. They started to renovate it. And about halfway through, they left it.
Yeah.
They left it. They still own it, but it's been sitting there empty with half of the house only framed inside. And this particular show, who really thrives on creating drama and who thrives on collecting oddities in a museum, went there and spent, I think, a few days there. And some of the things that when you watched it, because I did watch it, I admit it, when you watched it, were subtle, but were made to be a lot more dramatic. And the thing that always cracks me up on some of these shows is when a spirit box is used. We won't talk too much about a spirit box today. We'll have to talk about some of the technology. But when a spirit box is used, which uses frequencies and allows spirits, entities, beings, whatever, to communicate. And I don't know how they can possibly understand some of the sounds that come out of that. And I think just by sheer saying it over and over and over again, you want to hear those words they say.
Yeah, it's like suggestive.
Yeah.
They're suggesting it, and so then you hear it.
And sometimes there is a clear word, but many times it is left to interpretation. So I always wonder about spirit boxes and how much of it is real. We probably have one of our own stories we're going to share at some point where, yes, from what we've been able to experience, they can and are real. However, they don't have full conversations every time you try to use them as they do in some of these shows.
No, which is where the editing can look magical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that LA house, what ends up happening, and you have experience with this too, when people do renovations on homes, that if there has been or is some kind of a spirit there, that is disrupted by the renovation because something is changing. And especially if they took down some walls and are changing the space, then spirits might get angry about that and show themselves more or do different things like opening and slamming cupboards or playing music. They might do things like that to either show their discontent or to be curious. And what people don't realize is that you can actually talk to those spirits and say, hey, I want to honor this space, but I also need to make it mine. So here's what I'm going to do. Here's the plan. I just want to let you know you're welcome to stay or you're welcome to leave. You get to make that choice. And so informing them of what's going on is really helpful.
There's a lot of stories. Courtney has quite a few. I think, this kind of plays into maybe talking about what happened to me at my Michigan house after I bought it. God, there are so many things we're going to be sharing on here. This one is not too long, so I feel like we've got the time to probably share it because I think it was the thing that got me interested in what you were doing, Courtney, more than anything. And it kind of goes through my education on what was happening and why. And, you explaining and defining certain things that were going on, where they came from, what it was about. And as a result, how you addressed it for me. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be a bother and wouldn't be, let's just call it, scary as hell for me when I mm-hmm. moved in after I had the renovations done. Is this a good time? You want to jump into that as kind of incorporating everything we just talked about in an example? The reason is because we have some other stories. You have some other stories like I'm thinking about when one of your first investigations that I've asked you to tell me that story like 3 or 4 times. I think that's its own, some of the stuff you did in episodes is probably its own thing. This won't take too long, but I think for anyone listening to this episode where you're trying to learn and understand what are the differences, and there's not a lot out there that separates them. Maybe sharing my experience, I came up with those same questions that all you have that Courtney's been trying to answer and define on this episode. And it's about the house that I purchased in Michigan. And this is fairly recent. It's not like, 2 decades ago or something. No. But at the end of 2019, I bought a house in Michigan. We both live in California. We live on the California Central Coast, and we're not embarrassed to say we're right there on the Monterey Peninsula, Carmel, Monterey.
We're very lucky.
Not only are we very lucky, but Courtney is definitely in her element because it's probably one of the most haunted parts of California all along this coast.
For sure.
You will see that there are several experiences and stories to tell there, along with some of the stuff that Courtney's working on, where we're going to be talking about some of the most haunted places in California, two of which are within 20 miles of here. And Courtney will have some stories to tell on that.
Yeah.
So I got my house at the end of 2019. I was still living in California. The plan is that I was going to spend summers in Michigan on a lake with my family. And so I bought the house, and I knew I wasn't going to be there till the spring, summer. I was going to have some renovations done on it. And those renovations started in January and went through like March, April timeframe. And one of the things that I did after I got the house, since I wasn't going to be there and I was going to have a house full of stuff and construction, is I put cameras in. I put cameras in all around the house, inside the house. Yeah, you could say I'm a little bit of a control freak, but, wanted to make sure that I would deter anyone from messing with the house. I've heard stories about people breaking in and stealing all the construction supplies. Mm-hmm. But the long and short of it was, the construction started in the January timeframe, and about 3-4 weeks in, for probably about 8 weeks, I was getting these alerts on my security cameras in the middle of the night. It usually started around 11:30 midnight, and it went till about 4 o'clock in the morning,
which is the witching hours.
Yeah. And so I started getting these videos, these alerts, and it would take video. And at first I didn't think anything of it, but there were these orbs. And at the time I had a handyman also doing work for me, and I gave him access so he would get the alerts too, because he was local. And if there was an issue, he could run over to the house. He started getting these alerts, and he finally said, Tish, I think you better take a look at these cameras. There's some stuff going on at night. I'm like, what are you talking about? And at first it was just orbs. So the cameras in the living room in particular would pick up orbs, and the orbs would go in a circle, come up to the camera, sit in front of that camera, kind of jump back and forth. And then this is the freaky part. It would turn around and fly down a hallway towards the bedroom. Mm-hmm. That is not a bug. It is is a deliberate path.
And it was a big orb, not a small one, not like a bug. It was way bigger than that.
Yeah, it was
like the size of a human head.
Yes. And it would hover in front of the camera as if it's like, what is that? What's in there? I think it might have seen the light or something. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. Whereas a bug it has a very distinguishable kind of pattern in front of the light. You can usually see it. And so at first I'm like, I don't know. It's probably just dust, light, bugs. And this went on. So sometimes they were really big. Sometimes it was really small. And, but the thing that made it unique is there were distinct patterns. They were zipping to different parts of the room faster than any insect could, and in patterns that were not normal.
And it would go fast, slow. It would vary its speed too, which would also give you clues that it's not really a bug.
No. And at first I'm like, I didn't think anything of it. And after a few weeks, my handyman said, there's a lot of this going on. And so again, construction started in January. This is end of January. This is like February. And I think somewhere around March 8th, I finally reached out to Courtney because I had multiple videos that I had downloaded and started showing to her. And then one night I got an alert, and in the video, the kitchen cabinet opens and shuts. And not only do you hear it, you can see it in the background of the camera. And that's where I was like, oh my God, I bought this house and I'm going to have to live with this stuff. So I called Courtney and I said, I'll give you access. I'll send you these videos I have. I'll give you access to the system. I said, do you have to be here in person? I need you to come fix this. And you said, oh no, we can do it right through the camera. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea what you did, but within 3 days of me getting a hold of you, sharing the videos, and you doing whatever you do, I didn't get any, I haven't had any of that activity since.
Which is kind of sad because that was really fun.
Well, Yeah. And I've been in that house now for 3 years. I'm there for half the year, and I'm not as sensitive as you are or an empath as much as you are. But the energy in the house it always feels good.
It feels great there.
Okay. So here is the icing on the cake. It was only after the renovation was done that my handyman, Rod, was telling me, well, I wasn't going to say this to you before, but while I was painting, I was in the kitchen painting, and I had my phone with music on going, like every 25, 30 minutes, the volume would turn down, and I'd hear a thud in the back and then a growl. And I'm like, you shouldn't be telling me this. Why'd you tell me this? You didn't have to tell me this. And he said it happened several times. And there were times throughout the time he was there over the course of a few months where he'd have to walk outside and kind of clear his head, because whatever was making the sound did not sound, it wasn't like a pipe or anything. And he never told me any of this while he was doing the work. However, after you did whatever you did, that all stopped, because he's been my handyman since. So he's been back doing other things.
Yeah.
So first there's these orbs. I have never experienced any kind of energy in the house that felt any kind of weirdness or anything. And then he was telling me about this other thing, and it wouldn't, like, I could understand maybe volume going up and down. And I don't know if he was exaggerating, but he was like, there's a growl, like a growl coming from down the hall. And then my music would turn back up again. So whatever you did got rid of that, but maybe you can talk about what I just said and then what you did. Because whatever you did, it feels like a warm, beautiful place.
Oh, good. Well, oftentimes when people report things like that, people get very scared because they think something is out to get them. Something is going to harm them. And it is easy to think that way because you don't know what it is. So it's easy to let your imagination run away with you, from you. It's easy to have fear. And the thing to remember is that fear breeds fear. And anything that is there can grab onto your fear, and it feeds it, makes it bigger, gives it more energy. And so that's the one that is a big takeaway that I try and tell people is, if you have fear, it is going to grab onto that. And the best thing you can do is to breathe through it and not have fear. And generally, I think nothing is going to hurt me. And because I think that way, I don't let fear in. I'm like, hey, nothing's going to hurt me. I'm fine. My team, my crew, my guides are going to protect me. Everything is going to be fine. So what I did with your place is I explained about the renovations, and I explained that you just purchased the house and you were so excited to have time there. You were so excited to fill it with memories, with your loved ones, with people having fun and just enjoying life. And I talked about what the renovations were going to do to your place. I also talked about, because you and I had discussed, can this being stay? Whatever this is, can it stay?
Right.
And that was one big thing I wanted to ask you, because you have to have discussions with the being and with whoever lives there of, okay, can you come to a compromise? Because this is also potentially their space too. So is there a way to compromise, or do you just need it gone? And some people might say we need it gone because they can't handle those different feelings, and that's fine. But it's better to come to a compromise and to allow the spirit to leave on their own, right, versus forcing it. And so I just talked the spirit through, and I was like, hey, you're allowed to stay, because that's what we had talked about. You're allowed to stay. Right. You just can't cause harm.
I've never felt it or anything since.
No, I think it left.
I think you said sometimes they come in when you're doing renovations. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was.
So often spirits come in, or they wake up when you're doing renovations because you're making change to their space, or a space that they knew. So we all struggle with change, and spirits can struggle with change too. And so then they're like, oh, what's going on? They might get a little angry, or they might play tricks.
Right.
Often spirits don't want to be angry. It's more that they want attention. They want to be talked with. They want to hang out with you, they don't want to cause harm for the most part.
Why do they do it in the middle of the night then? Why don't they?
It's the witching hour. It's the quiet time.
Well,
they have more energy then.
Rod was definitely getting it during the day,
and that's possible too.
But then again, are they smart enough to know there's no one there?
I think so. Yeah.
But they still do what they do.
It's quiet. No one's around.
Well, I will say that when that came up, all these different things went through my head. What went through my head is this a ghost or is it a spirit? Is it a demon? Is it an entity? What is it? And that's why when you were going through all these things today, this resonated with me, is because I went through all this with the house and I'm like, what is it? What is it? What is it?
Yeah.
Is this going to haunt me the rest of my life there? And you're like, oh, no. I can, because and I think the right term is an empath, you could feel that energy was not a harmful energy.
No, it felt to me like it was playing tricks.
Yeah.
And I think I also had to explain who the handyman was, because the energy with you is different, because I believe it was a loved one of yours, and the energy was different. And I had wondered if the energy was feeling like territorial and protective of the space, and they didn't know who Rod was. They just knew there's a strange person in Tish's space.
We all have stories and experiences like this. And I think that, it was good to share this one after you educating all of us on all the different types of energies and ghosts and spirits, because you're going to hear us talk about these in these episodes. And once in a while, I think you're going to hear Courtney remind us all again when we talk about a spirit, or, there's going to be stories around elementals. Hopefully you'll be able to remind us, kind of again, connect the dots and what they are. But that's what this podcast is about. It's about understanding and not being afraid. It's about stories. We all want to hear stories and things that have happened that were exciting, interesting, probably enlightening. And, that's what we plan on doing. We plan on sharing some of the stories and kind of picking apart what happened and why and how they're addressed. And again, not forgetting that we're going to be talking about something that a lot of people ask about, which is all the equipment that's used.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
And how to use the different equipment, when to use it, what's overkill, how do you figure out, how do you determine what is the best equipment, the technology that's used behind it. And the great thing about Courtney and just how we think about this is we really want it to be kind of fact-based. So you always say that you want to make sure that if there's something to dispel, you want to dispel it to make sure you're getting the actual truth about what's happening. And you're just as I think critical and judgmental of the use of technology as anyone to make sure it's real, because it's so easy to make a bunch of assumptions or to think we hear words or the EMF goes crazy. Forget the fact that you just walk past a TV, right?
Yeah.
When you're walking through, Courtney's educated me on a lot of the stuff, and we'll be talking about a lot of that. So we're going to be talking about that too. But hopefully, today, everyone kind of got a good idea of what all these different things are. I mean, this is not just something you're interested in, but something you've studied for many years.
Yes. And it helps that naturally I'm a problem solver, and my career is science-based. And so that has really helped me try and be more reflective and mindful about what's going on in the space and how to dispel or think, oh, wait, is that really an energy? Or did I just see a car go down the street and its lights flashed in the house? So it's important to really think about that, because not everything is a spirit, not everything is a being, not not everything is that. And so it's really important to look around your area. I mean, I am intuitive, and that's the hard part too, because there's things that I can't explain that happen to me. The information sometimes that I'm channeling or that comes through me, and that's really hard to have it be more fact-based. But when especially talking about these different pieces and the different equipment we have, it is really important to be reflective and to try and problem solve of, could something else be actually physically creating that, or is it an actual spirit?
I think it's worth mentioning, how you said you're an intuitive, but for everyone listening, Courtney has a unique set of skills and gifts that I think go beyond that. And you're going to find that throughout this, because she is very humble about her ability to understand energy, to feel it. I think being able to sense seriously exactly who's around and knowing who to ask for, and interpreting the signals, the signs, the movements, the sounds. That's really what you're going to hear a lot about on this. And it's going to be really fun as we go down this path and tell our stories. The other cool thing we're going to be doing is setting up investigations. Courtney's already creating a list of people that she's going to be interviewing. I hope that you're going to have a few in there that really talk about technology, because I know that, you're really becoming friends and making relationships with people that build the equipment that's used. So I hope you tune in for us on our episode 3. And I think that Courtney can give a little preview maybe of what you're thinking about for episode 3.
Yeah, in episode 3, I want us to introduce our technology and to talk about what equipment we all have. Some of it is quite simple and foundational, and other stuff is more high-tech, new agey, just different. And we'll be talking about what pieces can help us and what pieces also we're like, oh, this isn't working for us. But the thing to remember is every piece of equipment is different for everyone.
That's true.
Some things tend to come through for me that just is that basic equipment, the dowsing rods, the pendulums, things like that. And other times we've had amazing work with spirit boxes.
How about the flashlight?
The flashlight's the coolest thing. If you guys follow us, by the way, on Instagram, Spirits and Cousins, you will see that I've posted one video with us doing some flashlight work.
And when after you listen to this podcast, if you go in the notes below, we'll provide a link to that.
We will.
To that Instagram. Courtney, don't you think it's time for us to have a little bit more of the Michter's American whiskey?
Absolutely. I'm just going to remind y'all to be curious.
Yes, be curious. And until next time, it's a clink of the cups. And you all stay tuned for the next Spirits
and Cousins
with Tish
and Courtney.